Welcome everyone. My name is Dan Gelinne. I'm happy to welcome you to today's CSCRS Research to Practice Bites session on Vision Zero initiatives in U.S. communities. Today we'll be hearing from Dr. Kelly Evenson, a professor of epidemiology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's Gelinne School of Global Public Health. So we're excited to have Kelly with us today. If you aren't familiar with the Collaborative Sciences for Center for Road Safety, CSCRS, our mission is to accelerate progress in reducing transportation-related injuries and fatalities, utilizing a systems approach to bring perspectives from planning, engineering, public health, data science, and robotics to the road safety field. We're one of two national centers with a designated research focus on transportation safety. We bring together staff, faculty, and students from different UNC departments, as well as those at our partner institutions that you see here on the screen. I do want to get into a bit of housekeeping before the webinar starts up. As participants, you're all muted today, but you do have the ability to submit questions using the Q&A function built into Zoom. We're holding a period of time at the end, about 10 minutes or so, for specifically responding to your questions. So please send those in as soon as you have them, and we'll spend some time with them later. Today's session is being recorded, and CSCRS will make the recording and the slides available later. And just a helpful tip for Zoom, you can choose the speaker view option at the top of your Zoom screen to optimize the view and the screen of the current speaker. So with that, I am happy to welcome Dr. Kelly Evenson for today's presentation. Kelly, go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much to the audience for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me for 30 minutes. In this session, I'll describe the characteristics of Vision Zero initiatives across the U.S. And I believe this overview could be especially helpful to communities considering Vision Zero to understand the experiences of those ahead of you in terms of implementation. But hopefully it will also be useful to those already with Vision Zero initiatives to learn how others operationalize it in their own communities. So I have no conflicts to report, and I want to acknowledge my research team, both faculty, staff, and students at the UNC School of Public Health, Injury Prevention Research Center, and Highway Safety Research Center. So Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. It was first implemented in Sweden in the 1990s, and around 2014, US communities began implementing Vision Zero into their own work. Not much is known about the extent of uptake of Vision Zero in the US or the attribute of the initiatives. We do know from the Vision Zero network, they keep a map of Vision Zero communities that's updated regularly. To be counted on this map, you must have a clear goal to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries. Your initiative needs to involve a mayor, have a plan or strategy in place, and have key departments leading the effort. So the communities on this map do change over time. We were interested in identifying all Vision Zero initiatives, even those that did not meet these requirements. So to do this, we conducted a web-based search of each of the 788 cities in the US with at least a population size of 50,000. And you heard me right, we searched 788 cities. We included any information through the year 2020 from their website, meeting minutes, plans, and resolutions if they had them. So to do this, we used several standard search terms in Google, including Vision Zero, Towards Zero, Road to Zero, Safe Systems. And then if we did not find anything, we went into their municipal website and did the same search. And at the end, if we still didn't find anything, then we called that no Vision Zero. So for those that we found Vision Zero, using an abstraction form, we abstracted the characteristics of the initiative, whether they had stakeholders involved, community engagement, their guiding documents, and implementation. The Vision Zero network published 9 components of a strong Vision Zero commitment, and we did attempt to capture many of these components as well. So in addition to the web surveys, I interviewed Vision Zero coordinators from among the 60 larger city initiatives. So we invited 20 coordinators from across the US at various stages of implementation. 12 participated in the interviews, 6 never responded, and 2 declined our invitation. All interviews were recorded, transcribed, and coded into themes. And in this presentation, I'll present numbers from the web-based assessments as well as the interviews. So from the web survey, we found 86 Vision Zero initiatives, 68 in large cities and 18 in mid-sized cities. Initiatives were more common in larger cities, as there was a stepwise progression between population size and the percent having an initiative. You can see on the far right, among cities with at least 500,000 population, 70% had an initiative. The initiatives dated back to 2014, or actually even earlier if we count Target Zero. There were probably more initiatives in 2020 on the far right, but we collected that data in summer and fall of the year, so we did not have a complete year for that year. So switching to the interviews, we asked how the initiative began, and often the interviewees provided multiple reasons. So for example, someone was killed in their community or they have high fatalities in their community. Champions were extremely important. For example, one person stated, "My understanding is that it came from our director of public service who attended a conference and learned about it. And having teenage drivers herself, she was like, why aren't we doing this? And really pushed an approach to our mayor for support and got Vision Zero that way." Another person stated, "I've been the champion for it, and I would say just a lot of professional passion for the topic. And so I think maybe I've been the glue that's held it together." There was also mention of state encouragement. One person stated, "Our city council passed a resolution saying the city should do Vision Zero. And then a year later, our state passed Vision Zero legislation adopting Vision Zero." MPOs were also sources of encouragement. For example, MPOs could pass a Vision Zero resolution. They could fund the local city's action plan, provide traffic data, or participate in regular meetings. Community advocacy and demand were also listed as a reason for why initiatives began. One person stated, "We've really have a motivated advocate base that was also pushing our council members and mayor at the time to adopt a Vision Zero policy." And finally, a few mentioned plans or policies. So for example, the city has a complete streets ordinance that was passed, and so Vision Zero was always sort of a goal or follow-up. From the web assessment, we searched on local commitment and whether there was a champion. We found that 71% of the initiatives had local commitment, such as evidence through a policy, resolution, or ordinance, and about 2/3 had an identifiable champion, such as a mayor or city council member. About 2/3 of the initiatives had a vision statement, either on their website or listed in their plan or resolution document. So for example, a vision statement would say, "Our vision is to eliminate all traffic deaths and severe injuries on city streets by the year 2027. When I explored the vision statements from the 58 initiatives that had one, I abstracted the year that they would reach zero traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. And this ranged from 2020 to 2040. 8% had no date identified and 33% had no vision, as I showed on the prior slide. Considering those that I interviewed, one person discussed the challenge in setting a precise year. The participant stated, "We debated about it. Do we want to set a target date of when we get to zero? How aggressive should we be?" And we ended up settling on a certain year, which is not that far off. It's very ambitious, you know. The nice thing about that would be, can we push and make rapid changes and prevent unnecessary deaths more quickly? But the downside of this is that if we undercut the credibility of the process if we don't reach that goal. Equity and safe systems are two important distinguishing tenets to a Vision Zero initiative. We tried to abstract evidence of those and found 57% mentioned equity and 69% mentioned safe systems or a systems-based approach. We looked through the website to find evidence of meetings that were held around Vision Zero, and about half, or 57%, had meetings both with government agencies and community stakeholders. Another 28%, we found meetings with just government agencies only, and 15% we could find no evidence of meetings, such as from meeting minutes. We abstracted what stakeholder groups were involved based on the list that you see on this slide, although we do recognize there are other types of stakeholders. Most commonly, initiatives involved from the categories listed here: law enforcement at 56%, transportation, and public health. Switching back to the interviews, we also asked them about the groups involved in their initiative, and most were internal to the municipality. And you can see the variety of examples on this slide. When talking to them about who led the initiative, it was often placed in transportation or planning, but not always. One interviewee commented that there was some debate about where to put Vision Zero, in the sheriff's office or the mayor's office. And our feeling was wherever it had a home, if provided it had adequate resources, it would be just fine. And there were a couple initiatives that actually were led across 2 departments. Back to the web-based assessment, we found about half had a coalition to help implement actions and provide feedback, and another 21% were working on forming a coalition. We assessed community engagement in 2020, which is the year we were abstracting, as well as before 2020, because we knew the pandemic could impact this. And indeed, we found evidence of engagement of about a quarter of the Vision Zero initiatives in 2020 and half before 2020. About half of the initiatives shared traffic-related data across stakeholder groups and or with their community members. And about 1/4 shared resources with stakeholder groups, such as staffing or funding. We found about half of the initiatives had Vision Zero plans, either that were published, and another 26% that were in development. The plans ranged in years from 2014, which was the earliest plan, which was New York City, to 2021. And there were 55% that had no plan or a plan in development. So when dividing the population, dividing the initiatives by population size, larger cities were more likely to have plans completed, about 50%, compared to mid-sized cities. In all, 75% of larger cities were developing or had completed a plan, whereas only 55% of mid-sized cities were developing or had completed a plan. And we found about half had started implementing Vision Zero strategies. In the interviews for most, but not all initiatives, some of their goals changed over time. And this list shows some of the reasons for the changes. There might be, it might be related to coordination with the state, being more specific about where to focus resources, so their goals changed. They realized that they wanted to have less focus on the E's. A quote I have for that, an interviewee stated, "We used to talk about the 5 E's. Since that time, we don't even mention that in the plan because we recognize that it's kind of outdated. It doesn't really get us where we want to go. It continues to silo these components, whereas they need to work collectively." Other reasons for changes in their Vision Zero goals: they wanted to create more short-term planning goals or update their goals because they had accomplished what they set out to do in the short term. And there were just a couple initiatives that said that actually their goals had not changed yet. Also from the interviews, they were asked to identify their 3 highest involved partners, and then for each one, whether their involvement in traffic safety increased, decreased, or stayed the same as a result of Vision Zero. Most of the initiatives were able to identify at least 1 or 2 of the 3 that had increased involvement due to Vision Zero. There were 2 initiatives that described a decrease in involvement, and one of those was the communications department. which saw a decrease in involvement as a result of the pandemic. Finally, from the web survey, about 1/4 paused or ended their Vision Zero initiative, and we define that as more than 1 year without any update on Vision Zero posted to their website when we abstracted in 2020. And right now I'm actually reviewing those communities, and I find evidence that some of them have restarted in 2022, while others do seem to have truly ended. So to summarize the strengths of this that I've just presented, we assessed all municipalities with a population size of at least 50,000 and used this mixed method approach, using the interviews to better understand what we were finding from the web-based assessments. But there are some limitations to mention. Of course, relying on websites, we rely on what's posted. And so certainly there could be underrepresentation of some of these characteristics. There may have been, for example, meetings that happened, but they just did not post those meeting notes. We may also miss initiatives that are in the early, what we call the exploration stage, because it may be before they even begin a public website. And then another limitation was that our interviews, we focused on the larger communities with at least 100,000. And so that doesn't necessarily extrapolate to the mid-size communities. So in summary, this work is the first to comprehensively describe the initiation and implementation of Vision Zero across the US. The results can provide a nationwide assessment of communities addressing Vision Zero to aid our understanding in the creative ways communities are adapting Vision Zero to fit their needs and facilitate uptake in other communities. So I want to share a few resources that may be of interest. The first is around Vision Zero plans. A couple years ago, we developed a guide to develop a Vision Zero plan. And then in the last year, we took the guide and actually on the right-hand side, you see that box, we created summaries for each of those components of a plan to make it easier to read if you're not interested in the entire guide. And all of these resources that I'm showing, we will be sending out an email with those links. So you don't have to worry about copying them down right now. I also want to mention our Vision Zero library of plans. If you're interested in actually looking at that, if you just type in UNC Dataverse and Vision Zero, it will come up. Right now, we have 60 plans that are in our library to make it easier for you to find plans and look at examples, and we'll be adding more as we go along. The website for this is in production, but this will make it easier to find the plans in certain states. And so hopefully this will be out of production when we send the email. For the website, you'll be able to click on a state. So for example, if I click on North Carolina, it will highlight and come up with the list of all the plans that we have in that state. And then I also want to mention through the Vision Zero Network, they have a guideline for an effective Vision Zero action plan, and that's available through their website. And I also want to mention FHWA's Zero Deaths, Saving Lives Through a Safety Culture and Safe System website, which also has numerous great resources. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the funding initiative that recently came out called Safe Streets and Roads for All, which is a grant program. They are funding 2 types of grants, an action plan grant around Vision Zero and an implementation grant. And that is all that I have. So I will stop and be willing to answer questions. And I do want to acknowledge CSCRS and the funding and also the coordinators that participated in the interviews. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thanks to the team that did all this work along with you. We have a number of questions. We'll get to those. I hope everyone sees Kelly's contact information here on this slide. We'll sit here a minute in case you want to jot that down and follow up separately. One question that came in that I really like questions about evaluation. This person's wondering about whether communities, as you've learned, whether they're evaluating their progress or maybe their lack of progress in achieving these goals, and maybe some of the specifics, if you're learning under any common threads about how that evaluation is going. Is this a common activity, or is this something that maybe falls off the priority list?
Yeah, we did collect whether they were evaluating. I just did not show it in the interest of time. The prevalence was lower than we would have liked. I don't remember the exact number, but yes, that's a good question. We would like to see them all evaluating their program.
Great. A couple of questions about stakeholders. One, just as you looked at the range of stakeholder types, and you showed that bar graph there, were there any sort of common threads or similarities between the mini cities that you teased out, or were any of them, I guess on the other hand, were any of them especially unique in the types of partners, or were there some unique partners that you only saw in maybe a couple of places that were involved?
Well, definitely there were some common stakeholders, and those were the ones that I mentioned that we saw the most. So transportation, planning, and law enforcement. But there were some unique ones. For example, human resources, I thought was unique. There were fewer that actually involved their communications department. And there were one or two that involved their parks and recreation department and IT as well. So that's why I put up that long list, because you can think creatively about who to involve in this initiative.
There's some follow-up questions too about maybe a unique partner category, this person asks whether private organizations or maybe entities that I guess rely on the transportation system for revenue generation have a role to play in these types of programs. Did you see any evidence of communities engaging with maybe freight operators or fleet managers, things like that?
So yeah, I have seen evidence of that in reviewing the plans. Not a lot, but some, and definitely there's a role for them to play in this regard. I think actually advocacy groups are underused in these Vision Zero initiatives. But the list that I showed of all the creative, that was just from the 12 communities. So they didn't necessarily list those examples, but I have seen them more advocacy listed in other plans that I've read.
Okay, great. And the person asking about links to the reports, we are providing a separate message with those, so hopefully you'll have access to all that information that that Kelly shared. A couple of questions about whether you found any evidence of initiatives that were kind of led or maybe spearheaded by victims' families or victim advocates, kind of representing those who had been involved in crashes previously.
I am not aware of any that are being led in that way. There may have been initiatives that got started that way, that by having them involved helped start the process, but I am not aware of any where they're actually leading the initiative.
Okay.
I will say, for example, there was one community that was one of the 22 that was no longer an initiative in terms of our definition of initiative. They actually started through an advocacy group that created a Facebook page and was advocating for Vision Zero, but it just never took off. So they were trying to make it work in their community. So we did count them as an initiative, but then it never took off. But that's sort of an example of that. But I will say that there are creative ways to do Vision Zero. So just because there's not that example doesn't mean you can't be the first.
No, that's a good point. Similarly, I guess there's a question about whether you're seeing evidence of youth-focused or safe routes to school being sort of a generator of interest in Vision Zero programs, and whether that's sort of taken hold in other communities.
You know, the goals that Vision Zero initiatives cover range widely, and they often cover from youth all the way to the elderly. But I would say in the interviews that I did, there were only a couple that actually had a specific youth focus. It wasn't, at least in the interviews, it wasn't necessarily their predominant focus.
Okay. I thought this was a pretty interesting question too. This person asks if for plans that had been in place or maybe adopted a while ago, maybe 5 years ago, did you find that the enthusiasm in those places was still there for Vision Zero? This person mentions that they spoke with a city, and it seems like the thrill of the new program and the luster of it kind of wore off over time.
Yeah, that is a good question, and I'm not sure of the answer. There definitely are places that have updated their plans 2 and 3 times, and even more, putting out their accomplishments. And so I think that does help. But yeah, we don't have enough examples of those that have gone that long. But it is an excellent question.
I was going to ask a question about that, and building on that point, how often are you seeing communities taking that step of sort of the annual reporting back to the community to really advertise sort of the progress they've made? It may not be that they've eliminated fatalities, but surely they, some communities at least, are putting together packages of information to let people know, hey, we are working on this and moving forward. Is that a common thing?
It's not as common, and that is actually, an example of what we would call full implementation of Vision Zero. So they're pretty far along in that they have a plan, and they're actually had time to do interventions and then report back. We would like to see initiatives doing that, but there aren't as many. And we did collect information on that. I didn't share the exact numbers with our 30-minute bite.
Sure. And this may be one of the last questions we have time for, unfortunately, but as a starting point for these communities that are pursuing Vision Zero, are you often seeing that initial step is an assessment or a look at crash data, fatalities, injuries, or sort of system-wide, and really developing priorities and maybe focus areas within that?
Yes, that would be a great place to start. I think too, looking at communities in your state that might have Vision Zero. Not all states have Vision Zero, but those that do, from the interviews that I did, those that had other initiatives in their state, they found it very helpful to talk to each other and understand how to implement within their state context.
Great. I'm going to sneak one more in here. I think many people are familiar with lists of communities with Vision Zero programs. Someone mentioned the Vision Zero network. Is your list of communities that you've compiled and looked at something you've made available? I can see with the websites that you mentioned, and maybe people can get at that sort of a master list of where those communities exist.
Yeah, we are not making that list available, but another good place to look besides the map of Vision Zero from the Vision Zero network is our plan database, because we are asking any initiative that we find as we defined a Vision Zero plan, we are asking them if we can upload their plan to our database. So that's a great place to look as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, and your entire team. We appreciate the hard work you've put into exploring this topic, and I know it's of interest of everyone here today. So thank you again for being here. I think we have some information to share as we head out the door before you leave about our next webinar. Jennifer, if you want to pull any of that up. We do have a session scheduled for June 22nd. The session is going to focus on strategies for managing the effects of kinetic energy in crashes. So we'll be welcomed, or we will be joined by Offer Grimbeck, who's the co-director of SafeTrek at the University of California at Berkeley. Certainly a topic that builds on a lot of the Vision Zero plans and initiatives that Kelly and her team explored today. So we'll get back next month with an exploration of the kinetic energy and its role in traffic safety. So we hope you can join us, and we'll see you all then.